"Don't come," my father said. "You'll only humiliate us." I stood in my apartment with the phone pressed to my ear, staring at the pecan pie I had picked up that morning. "Humiliate you how?" I asked. Dad exhaled sharply. "Daniel's family will be there. They're successful people, Natalie. Your sister has worked hard to build a respectable life. We don't need you sitting at the table talking about some little office job." Before I could respond, he hung up. A minute later, my sister's name appeared on my screen. "Daniel doesn't talk to nobodies. Please don't make this awkward." I read the message twice. Then I placed the pie in a carrier, changed into a navy blouse, and grabbed my keys. My family thought they were protecting themselves from embarrassment. What they didn't know was that I had met Daniel Carter long before my sister introduced him as the most impressive man she had ever dated. And when he saw me walk through that door, the person embarrassed wouldn't be me. For years, I had learned to make myself smaller around my family. Whenever my younger sister announced a promotion, Dad opened champagne. When I once mentioned overseeing a major company expansion, he interrupted me to ask whether my job still involved answering emails. After that, I stopped explaining. I didn't tell them about the executive meetings, the national contracts, or the hundreds of employees whose departments eventually reported through me. When my parents fell behind on their property taxes, I paid the balance through their accountant. When Dad needed help with medical expenses, I transferred the money without putting my name on it. I kept believing quiet loyalty would mean something. It never did. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, several expensive cars lined the curb. Through the front window, I could see relatives gathered around Daniel, while my sister stood beside him, glowing under Dad's attention. For 1 second, I considered driving away. Then I remembered his words. "Don't come." I picked up the pie and walked to the door. The moment I entered, conversation stopped. Dad rose from his chair. "You actually came?" My sister's smile tightened. "Natalie, we told you this wasn't a good idea." Across the room, Daniel turned toward the doorway. His glass paused halfway to his mouth. His face changed. Then he set the glass down and started walking directly toward me. Dad reached me first. He caught my elbow and steered me into the hallway with a grip tight enough to make the pie carrier tilt. "What are you doing?" he whispered. "I told you not to come." I pulled my arm free. "It's Thanksgiving. I'm your daughter." "Not tonight." His eyes flicked toward the dining room. "Daniel's parents are here. These people own businesses. They know senators. I'm not having you sit there talking about answering emails all day." I looked at him. "Why do you keep assuming that's what I do?" Dad gave a tired laugh. "Because every time we ask, you say you work in operations. That's office work, Natalie. Don't turn this into one of your speeches." One of my speeches. The phrase landed harder than I expected. I thought about the property tax notice I had quietly paid through his accountant 2 years earlier, the hospital balance I covered after his surgery, the internship connection I arranged for my sister through a regional partner. Dad had thanked everyone except me. From the hallway, I could see the dining room wall covered with framed photographs of my sister. Graduation, promotions, engagement pictures. There wasn't a single recent photo of me. Then I noticed the table. Every place had been set carefully with folded napkins and name cards. There was no seat for Natalie. Dad followed my stare. "We planned for the people who were invited." I handed him the pie. Then I walked past him, opened the garage door, and returned carrying a metal folding chair. My sister stared as I placed it at the end of the table. "You cannot be serious," she said. "I'm staying for dinner." Footsteps stopped behind me. Daniel stood in the doorway, looking directly at my face. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Boss, what are you doing here?" The room went completely silent. Every conversation stopped at once. My sister looked from Daniel to me with a confident smile, as if she expected him to ask me to leave. Instead, Daniel walked toward me. "Good evening," he said politely. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." Before I could answer, Dad laughed awkwardly. "Oh, you two have met?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." Dad waved his hand dismissively. "Small world. She's just my older daughter. She works in an office somewhere." The smile disappeared from Daniel's face. Just your older daughter? His tone wasn't rude. It was confused. I could almost see him trying to make sense of what he was hearing. My sister slipped her arm through Daniel's. You probably ran into each other years ago, she said quickly. Natalie has had a few office jobs. Daniel looked at her, then back at me. No, he replied calmly. We've worked together recently. The entire dining room grew quieter. An uncle set down his fork. One of Daniel's parents exchanged a curious glance with the other. Dad forced another laugh. Well, there you go. Funny coincidence. Daniel didn't laugh. Instead, he pulled out the folding chair beside mine and sat down without asking anyone else. My sister blinked. Daniel, you're supposed to sit next to me. I'll move in a minute, he answered absent-mindedly. I just want to understand something first. His attention never left me. How long have you been here? He asked. I just arrived. And they didn't invite you? I hesitated before answering. They asked me not to come. Several relatives visibly stiffened. Dad immediately interrupted. That's not what happened. It is, I said quietly. We simply thought tonight would be different, Dad insisted. We wanted everything to go smoothly. Daniel frowned. I don't understand. Dad smiled tightly. You don't need to. The room had become painfully uncomfortable. No one reached for the food. No one spoke. Even my sister looked uneasy now. Daniel finally leaned back in his chair and folded his hands together. I've met Natalie several times professionally, he said evenly. Every interaction I've had with her has been impressive. Dad smiled again, but this time it looked forced. Well, that's nice to hear. Daniel continued. I've actually learned quite a lot from her. I noticed several relatives looking directly at me for the first time all evening. The assumptions they had carried into Thanksgiving were beginning to crack. Dad cleared his throat. Let's just eat. Nobody moved. The silence stretched until Daniel slowly pushed his chair back and stood. He looked around the table. I think everyone here should know something. Before Daniel could continue, Dad raised both hands. Absolutely not, he said sharply. Work stays at work. Today is Thanksgiving. Daniel remained standing. With respect, Richard, this isn't really about work anymore. Dad's smile disappeared. I said we're changing the subject. Daniel looked at me instead. Natalie, are you comfortable if I explain how we know each other? Every eye in the room shifted toward me. I could feel my sister staring, waiting for me to refuse. I simply nodded. Go ahead. Daniel took a slow breath. I joined my company a few months ago. It was one of the most competitive executive hiring processes I've ever been through. My sister smiled faintly. That sounds impressive. It was, Daniel replied. The final interview wasn't with human resources. It was with the executive responsible for operations across several divisions. No one interrupted him now. He asked questions nobody else asked. He wanted to know how I handled people, pressure, accountability, and growth, not just numbers. He looked directly at me. I walked out of that interview knowing I'd just met the best leader I'd worked with. My sister's expression froze. Dad shifted uneasily. Daniel continued. When I accepted the position, that same executive approved my hiring package. Since then, every major operational review for my division has gone through that office. An aunt frowned. So, this executive manages you? Yes. And you've met this person often? Daniel nodded. Every executive meeting. He smiled respectfully toward me. She challenges us, supports us, and expects excellence from everyone. My sister slowly turned toward me. Natalie? I didn't answer. Dad's face had lost all its color. Daniel continued speaking, connecting every piece together. She leads hundreds of employees. She oversees expansion projects worth millions, and everyone in the company knows exactly who she is. The room became so quiet that the ticking clock in the hallway suddenly sounded loud. My sister looked between Daniel and me again. Realization slowly spread across her face. No, she whispered. Dad abruptly stood. That is enough. Daniel didn't even glance at him. Instead, he looked around the table one final time. Then he asked quietly, "So, why was everyone pretending my boss doesn't belong here?" No one answered. My father's mouth opened, but no words came out. The silence became unbearable. Finally, Dad slammed his hand against the table. "Dinner's over," he barked. "Everyone needs to leave, right now." No one stood. Dad's order hung in the air, but for the first time in my life, it carried no authority. Daniel looked around the room, then spoke with the same calm professionalism I had seen in board meetings. "I think everyone deserves to understand why this happened." Dad shook his head. "There is nothing to explain." "There is," Daniel replied, "because I have spent the last several months reporting to one of the most respected executives in our company, and I've just watched her own family treat her like she isn't worthy of sitting at their table." He turned toward me. "Natalie Brooks is the senior operations director who oversees my division." Several relatives stared at me in disbelief. Daniel continued before anyone could interrupt. "She interviewed me herself. She approved my hiring package. Every strategic review my team submits goes across her desk. Hundreds of employees work under the operational structure she leads." He looked back at my father. "So when you said she would embarrass your family because she answers emails, I honestly thought you were joking." Nobody laughed. My sister slowly lowered herself into her chair. Her face had gone completely pale. You're his boss?" she asked, barely above a whisper. I nodded once. "I never hid it from the people who asked because they cared. I stopped talking about work here because every accomplishment became something to dismiss." She blinked repeatedly. "You never told us." I tried. I looked at Dad. "When I mentioned my first promotion, you interrupted to ask if I was finally making enough to buy decent clothes." I turned toward my aunt. "When I mentioned leading a regional project, everyone changed the subject to my sister's new apartment." Then I looked back at my father. After enough of those conversations, I stopped bringing it up. Daniel's mother finally spoke. "So she chose privacy because she expected to be criticized?" I gave a small smile. It was easier than competing for approval I was never going to receive. The room fell silent again. Dad rubbed both hands across his face. "You should have corrected us." "I did," I answered quietly. "Just not forever." I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired. For years, I helped because you're my family. When the property taxes were overdue, I paid them. When the hospital sent collection notices after your surgery, I covered the balance. When Emily needed introductions for internships, I called people in my network. Every head turned toward my father. His eyes widened. "You? That was you?" "Yes. You told the accountant it was anonymous." I wasn't looking for credit. My aunt stared at Dad. "You've been telling everyone Emily was the one carrying this family." No one defended him. My sister covered her mouth. "I thought Mom and Dad handled all of that." "They let you believe it," I said gently. She looked at our father with tears forming in her eyes. "You knew." Dad couldn't answer. Daniel finally spoke again. "Richard, this isn't about money or job titles." "No," Dad muttered. "It isn't. It's about respect," Daniel continued. "If I had never worked with Natalie, I would have walked into this house believing everything you said about her. Instead, I know the person who mentors executives, solves problems without taking credit, and earns respect because of how she treats people." He paused. "And tonight I watched all of you treat that person like she was an embarrassment." My sister looked at Daniel. "You're not seriously judging me over one dinner." "One dinner?" he asked quietly. "This wasn't one dinner. There wasn't even a place set for your own sister." She looked toward the empty space where my chair should have been. For the first time, she had no explanation. Daniel stepped closer to me. "I owe you an apology. You didn't do anything. I brought people into a room where they expected to meet your family." He glanced around the table. "I didn't realize they didn't know who you were." I smiled. "That's not your fault." He nodded. "No, but what happened after I found out matters." He turned back toward my sister. "I need some time." Her eyes filled with panic. "Daniel, I love you," he said honestly, "but I can't ignore what I witnessed today. If this is how your family treats someone who has done nothing but help them, I need to think very carefully about what that means for our future." He walked outside for some air. My sister didn't follow him. She simply sat there staring at the untouched Thanksgiving dinner. Over the next several weeks, relatives began calling me, not because of my title, because they finally learned the truth. One by one, they apologized for believing the stories they had been told about me. Several admitted they had always wondered why I seemed so distant at family gatherings. Now they understood. Dad called more than once. Sometimes he left long voicemails. Sometimes he simply said, "Can we talk?" Eventually we did. I told him I wasn't interested in reliving every painful holiday. But if we were going to have a relationship, it had to be built on honesty instead of comparison. He agreed. Whether he truly changed would take time. My sister also reached out. Her apology wasn't immediate or perfect. It took months before she finally admitted that she had enjoyed being treated as the successful daughter because it made her feel secure. We started over slowly, not as rivals, as adults willing to face uncomfortable truths. As for Daniel, he remained exactly who I had always known him to be at work: professional, respectful, and fair. Whether his engagement survived wasn't something I involved myself in. That decision belonged to him. The only decision that belonged to me was how I would live going forward. I stopped hiding my accomplishments, not because I needed applause, because shrinking myself had never brought peace. It had only made it easier for other people to decide who I was. The next Thanksgiving, I accepted an invitation from friends and colleagues who wanted me there simply because they enjoyed my company. No one questioned whether I belonged. No one measured my worth against someone else's success. For the first time in years, I sat down at a holiday table without wondering if I had earned my seat. That Thanksgiving taught me something my career never could. The people who truly respect you don't need to know your title before they decide you deserve a seat at the table.